Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I think we are waiting for one more of the presenters, but I think we can maybe start now. So, welcome everybody. My name is Richard Bout. I'm the program director of the Southeast Europe and Black Sea region program with the Platform for Peace and Humanity. And we've organized this series of webinars to look at Georgia at the crossroads, democracy, society, and future. And this is an exploration of the election period, both prior to the elections, around the election time, and then post-election results. This first session is looking at tensions and transformations, Georgia's political landscape in the context of local elections. And with us, we have a great panel, which I'd like to introduce to you, and then I'll explain a little bit about how this will proceed. So first of all, we have Shauba Zebisashvili, who is a professor at the University of Georgia. Second, Elena Kaihosh-Roshvili, who is a human rights defender and activist. Third, we have Georgi Butekashvili, who is the Foreign Secretary of the Ahali Party and is a PhD candidate. And then finally, we have a colleague of mine, Maggie Benia, who is a PhD candidate at Tbilisi State University and a researcher in the program on the platform. Unfortunately, Tina Bolokadze was unable to attend this event for a very serious reason, which we will actually discuss moving forward in this conversation. So what I would like to do is I'll just give a quick background of the process and then we'll begin. So we'll have around 30 minutes of panel presentations, and I'll introduce each one in turn and tell you what they will be discussing. Then we'll move on to a facilitated discussion amongst the panelists, and then we'll finish with a Q&A from the audience. So audience, if you have any questions, please add those into the Q&A section. And Maggie and I will be observing those as we move through. If we can, all the panelists can please keep on mute when you're not speaking, that would be great. So if I can start, I'd like to ask Georgi to, as I mentioned, explain a little bit about this situation that emerged overnight last night, and then to link that into an understanding of the political environment and why these elections are so critical. Thank you, Georgi.
So hi everyone. Thank you for having me here for the discussion because every single word said among our Western partners is very important for Georgia's European future. What we see today in Georgia is completely the process of polarization, and in every single steps, what the Georgian dream is following is in pattern what we saw in Russia, what we saw in Belarus. So the situation is very critical. What happened yesterday, our party member, Coalition for Change, I'm representing the party Ahali, but we are Coalition for Change and broader spectrum of the oppositional parties, unity. Member of the party Druas member, Gela Khasaya, he has been arrested from a stupid charge. We never understand what was the real reasons behind, because the police said to Gelas in 1 month ago that he will be arrested for criminal charge without a reason. So he warned Gela. So thing is what is developing in Georgia, GD, Georgian Dream, Ivanishvili's regime is trying to silence every dissent, silence every kind of critical voices, even in civil society, in media, and in the politicians, in political parties. From my Coalition for Change, from the party Unity, all 4 leaders has been jailed. Nika Guaramia, Nika Melia, Elena Khoshtaria, and Zura Girchi Japari, the 4 of them has been jailed because the demands, Nika, and Zura they have not appeared to the investigation commission, which was created by Georgian Dream after parliamentary election to investigate criminal cases, so-called criminal cases of UNM party and the parties who are linked to UNM. Three of them have never appeared to the commission, so they started criminal charge against him. They have been jailed, and Elena Hostaria has been jailed because he wrote on the billboard of Kala, the mayor of Kala, the candidate now, Russian regime. So because of painting something on his billboard, she has been jailed. So this is the situation. Every day we are witnessing here. Same pattern what we saw in Belarus and in Russia, and we are waiting still that there will be a huge crackdown on 4th of October, day when a huge rally is planned. GD is warning everyone that every kind of um, protest will be cracked down. They are setting fear among the protesters, and we should see it in broader context. What does Ivanishvili want in this situation? What is the main goal of Ivanishvili? And Ivanishvili is not single person. He is a proxy of Putin, Russia. Since I joined the politics last year, I am Russian hybrid warfare researcher. I have researched Russian hybrid warfare in Georgia and Germany. So I'm following all the patterns, how Ivanishvili's regime started state capturing and how he's fulfilling it nowadays. The thing is, Ivanishvili and Putin wants to hold Georgia in her influence zone since Russia is losing the war in Ukraine almost. Russia lost Armenia, Azerbaijan. He's losing the whole region, Black Sea region, and it's very important for Putin to have this stronghold in the region. The thing is, Ivanishvili is not a single person. O- he owns his money is linked to Russia, to Gazprom, and to the criminal gangsters who are now the oligarchs acting in Russia and survived Putin's regime. So Ivanishvili wants to give to stop to how I say it, to finish the protest in Georgia in any way with any kind of steps because we rejected the parliamentary election, which was rigged. We canceled our mandates in the parliament. Uh, we started a protest outside in the street. The political process is completely in the streets. There's no real political process in the parliament because there is no parliament, legitimate parliament. We started together with the different oppositional parties delegitimation process for Ivanishvili's regime, and we fulfilled it. We managed that Ivanishvili's regime is a Russian regime, and they have no legitimacy in Georgia and outside Georgia. So Ivanishvili and Putin especially wants Georgia not to squeezed in like geopolitics. So they need real proxy like Belarus, accepted by the Western countries as an autocratic system and follow the geopolitical goals of Putin. So this is the main idea of Ivanishvili. And to this, regarding the local election, what is also now on 4th of October happening in Georgia, this is no local election. It's a fraud election because the situation even worsened in Georgia. Central Election Commission is like a proxy of Ivanishvili. So it makes no reason to participate in local elections since it's no election. The role of political parties, of course, is to participate in local election in democracy, but this one is no elections. We can call it election. It's a fraud election, and we want to play Ivanishvili's game. somehow to give him status quo, that is, there is some pattern of democracy. There is no pattern of democracy. Democracy already died in Georgia, and we are resisting in streets, and we are trying to stay together, to make bigger coalitions, to make a broader resistance, to show the Western countries there is no democracy, and we are fighting for our European future and for democracy. Thank you.
Great, Georgi, thank you very much for that. Please, if anyone does have questions on this, please put them in the Q&A, and more will come from the facilitated discussion as well. Okay, we'll move on to Hélène. If I can ask you, Hélène, to really maybe respond to what Georgi is saying, but from the perspectives of human rights and gender, and what is happening on the streets of Georgia today in that sphere. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Okay. First of all, thank you very much for organizing this and giving us the platform to share what's going on in Georgia. I agree with everything that Georgi said. I was a human rights lawyer, mainly concentrating on women and queer women's rights. And today there is practically no line anymore between a human rights defender, a human rights watchdog organization, and an activist. Today we have this circumstances in Georgia that everyone who used to work on human rights on policy level, cooperate with government, drafting researches, helping them to conduct reforms, this is not possible anymore. It was already hard after 2022 in Georgia, and especially after 2023, when it was the first time when the so-called Russian law was initiated. After that, it's completely impossible. There is no more bridge between civil society, human rights watchdog organizations, and the government entities, including the parliament and every public entity. So basically, three main laws exist right now in Georgia that make it impossible for human rights defenders to work at all. This is the so-called FARA. You are probably aware of this. This is a foreign agents transparency law that basically announces all the organizations or private individuals who receive funding from outside of Georgia as agents of foreign influence, and they are obliged to register themselves as foreign agents of foreign influence, which is very derogatory, and a lot of, like, all of the human rights organizations who were considered to be human rights watchdog organizations and were stars in this field refused to register themselves. There is also this law called the grants law, very shortly, that obliges organizations to and donor organizations to register the grants before they are able to execute the activities. And we have already in practice, we have already some instances where government has refused to give these grants. And we also have the so-called anti-LGBT law. They call it like defending family values and minors, which basically prohibits freedom of expression, and they can apply it to political opinions as well. So all of this together, including the repressions that I will talk about a little bit later, make it impossible for human rights organizations and individual experts to operate. So what we do now, as I said, we are like partly activists now. Most organizations, a lot of organizations are already liquidated because of the unreasonable sanctions. And those who are operating still, they are busy, first of all, defending themselves because they are themselves under attack under the laws that I have already listed. Most of them have already received the letters saying that they have to provide information, including private information of their beneficiaries, which they do not intend to do. So this is what they are doing. Most organizations, legal aid sections, are trying to defend protesters against unreasonable fines, for example, for blocking the streets. It used to be 500 Georgian lari, which is approximately like a little bit more than 200 euros, and now it's 5,000 Georgian laris, which is a little bit more than 2,000 euros. They are fining IDPs, they are fining students who have no income at all, and organizations basically are trying to help protesters out in these charges. Also, criminal cases. You probably know that in Georgia right now we have more political prisoners than we have ever had before. It's over 70 now that I've counted. These are people who have been detained, including politicians, but also protesters who have been detained during the protests on streets during last year. And Georgian justice system was never the best in the world, but even by the standards of Georgian justice system, what we are observing in these cases, the level of evidence, the level of justification of prosecution, it's like, I have to say the propaganda televisions are not even covering these issues because they have basically by their own standards these cases do not stand before the court, so they try to avoid these cases. They only detain these people so that these big uprising doesn't happen anymore and people are afraid to go to streets. And I also want to touch upon the issue of election in Georgia. These organizations that I've mentioned who are working on human rights and who are called human rights watchdog organizations, they were also the organizations who were leading observing organizations who were trusted most. I'm talking about ISFED, I'm talking about Georgian Young Lawyers Association, a 30-year-old organization without Georgian Young Lawyers observation, there has been no elections in Georgia. So it's a tradition that they do it, and this is going to be the first election that they are not going to be able to observe. And of course, also TI and a couple of other organizations that have been active in this field, they are not going to be able to observe. And I also have to say, first, the participation in these so-called local elections, and I'm saying so-called because this is the words that we are using. Georgian people, including mainly the protesters, do not believe that these are elections anymore. We do not believe that Georgian Dream's regime can be trusted to conduct elections because of what we have seen in 2024. And I have to say, in Georgia elections, trust for election administration has never been very high, but we have very tangible evidence that is overwhelming that happened, what happened in 2024, that it was fraudulent elections, and the propaganda the journalists who are working for propaganda televisions have started asking these questions in January and February, whether political parties would participate in local elections. And this was very clear that they wanted to polarize protesters with this issue. They wanted to polarize political parties. They knew that some political parties would be inclined to participate. And it was also too early. Like there was still a lot of people on the streets. We still believe that in a couple of months, we could bring some change with protests, and they managed to polarize with this election issue protesters and also political parties. Some of them decided to participate in it. And of course, Georgian Dream, they are also saying it by themselves. They are using local elections and the participation of two mainstream opposition political parties in these local elections to legitimize their regime in front of locally, of course, and also in front of international society. But also these political parties who are participating in it, they are indicating that they do not give legitimacy to the elections of 2024. But mostly, I don't know if I may speak from my personal perspective. I don't know anyone who is involved in the protest and is going to participate in elections, mostly because of the lack of trust and also because there are not going to be any trusted observers in these elections. And the Georgian Dream has outlawed even the observation. There are now laws against what observers can observe. The registration desk, they are not even going to be allowed to go near the registration desk where the main part of the fraud is happening. So a lot of protesters, most of them are inclined not to even call these elections elections. I'm sorry if I exceeded my time, but it's very hard to speak shortly when it comes to these issues.
Oh, thank you, Ellen. I appreciate that. Thank you very much for everything you said there. Again, to the audience, please add any questions you have to specific panelists or to the whole panel in the Q&A tab that you'll find on the top bar. Okay, we'll move on now to my colleague Maggie, who will talk a little bit about the politicization of public service and the kind of impact that has on the independence of institutions and the rule of law. So in a way, bridging some of that social and the political that we've heard about already. So over to you, Maggie. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Richard. I'm also sorry dealing with this moderating stuff because people are coming in and I'm admitting them. Sorry for that. Thank you. And thank you, first of all, for having me on board with the platform, as well as for agreeing to organize this webinar series, because this is very important for Georgia, especially considering the situation and the reality. We discussed this a lot with you as well when there's no much attention to the developments in Georgia. And for instance, in comparison to what's happening in Moldova or what happened in Moldova, here are the far greater things unfolding, but the coverage of these issues is let's say limited, I would say, on international arena. So thank you for speakers, my friends who agreed to participate. And since I'm a former diplomat, as well as former civil servant, I'm more than happy to focus on this politicization of Georgia civil service, because as you are well aware, without independent and credible civil service and government institutions, it's simply impossible to hold free and fair elections. So what happened with the civil service in Georgia is that everything started on November 28. Obviously, we always had the problems and difficulties with good governance. It's normal for the country which used to be part of Soviet Union, because it's accompanied with certain troubles and certain difficulties, but we were making our steps and we were progressing. But what happened on November 28? It was the so-called Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhidze announced the decision of the ruling party Georgian Dream that they will postpone EU accession process at least until 2028. So it triggered a mass protest outside in the streets of Georgia, and Tbilisi, of course, was the spotlight. Obviously, as my colleague, especially Elena, mentioned, that it didn't start with November 28th, of course, and we had mass protests and demonstrations in regards to the so-called Russian law and so on, and all other developments. I won't repeat that, but this was huge. Apart from the protest that we saw on the streets, the public service also opposed. The first was the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Georgia. My colleagues and I, we issued a statement, let's say roughly in 3 or 4 hours, denouncing this decision and also stating that we remain committed to the constitutional principles of Georgia, specifically Article 78 that states that the government institutions must do everything to ensure that this country becomes member of EU and NATO, that expressing that we are remain committed to Georgia's Euro-Atlantic and European and Euro-Atlantic aspirations, and most importantly, the national interests of Georgia. Of other ministries followed this move. The first after the Ministry of Foreign Affairs probably was the Ministry of Defense and other agencies. And I think roughly we had with different statements, it was not one statement, thousands of civil servants opposing this decision. Only at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we had 240 diplomats and employees of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Of course, the ruling party did not leave this unnoticed and without response. And already in December, they announced amendments to the law on public service. But they couldn't implement these amendments without the signature of the president. And back then, the president was Salome Zurabishvili, and she, of course, refused to do that. And there were also other amendments to other laws. And when they legitimately elected Mikhail Kavalashvili as the president, he signed dozens of laws in one day. And this is when it came into force. So this amendment. So starting from January, we began to see the consequences of this so-called shifts and changes, and the reorganization processes started at different ministries. Obviously, we had the separate cases of illegal unfair dismissals already in December, but institutionalized process of reorganization started in January. If I'm not mistaken, the first one was the Ministry of Defense, and around, if not more, 20 defense and security professionals were dismissed from the ministry. And what is more important, a special division, which was dedicated to one of the core mechanisms of Georgia's NATO integration, which is substantial NATO Georgia package. We had a division that was responsible for implementation of this mechanism. It was shut down. And I want to mention for the speakers outside Georgia that this mechanism is the unique mechanism that NATO does not have with any other aspirant country or any other partner. Only Georgia has this mechanism, and this is very important. And the last but not least was the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and they started officially the reorganization process here on April 29, and finished with dismissal of around 40 diplomats here in Tbilisi on July 1st. I was among them, and around 30 diplomats from the embassies and consulates overseas. Of course, overseas, and what I want to mention here as well, this is more important than just personal dismissal of individuals, is that they managed the role of the departments and divisions working on NATO and EU, squeezing the departments into divisions and so on. And they also shut down the division responsible for another NATO mechanism, which is Annual National Program. Based on all this, what I said, this is definitely are not just reforms as they try to frame it, as a deliberate act of dismantling the very institutions and expertise that is responsible for Georgia's European and Euro-Atlantic aspirations. And you all know that without independent, credible, and neutral civil service, it is impossible to launch free and fair elections, to hold free and fair elections. And if on the one hand it undermines democracy and rule of law, on the other hand it leaves Georgia without its partners, without distance from the free world, and this is a very dangerous development. I'll stop here because I know that Lasha will explore more about this, about foreign policy and security policy, and that's why I won't expand my remarks focusing on those issues, and I'm more than happy to speak more about this during the Q&A or during the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie. Great. Okay, again, just to reiterate, as Maggie has said, please do add any questions into the Q&A so we can get organized on that in advance. So Shalva, I'll pass over to you to discuss really kind of bringing together all the three sets of comments we've heard already into what this looks like in the kind of geopolitical regional picture, if you could take that. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Maggie. I think this is titanic work I have to do to perform within 5 to 10 minutes to squeeze all this information presented brilliantly by my colleagues into 10 minutes presentation. But I will generally go over the importance of the political events in Georgia in the context of the governance legitimacy, first of all. Because once we touch upon the question of the local elections now, the local elections are not isolated phenomenon. These local elections are inherently linked to the problem of the legitimacy of the governance system in Georgia after the parliamentary elections or after the illegitimate or rigged elections, parliamentary elections in Georgia in October 2024. So the problem of legitimacy of government and of governance, of course, is directly also related to another huge problem in Georgia my colleagues were dwelling on, is the rapid democratic backsliding, or let's be blatant in this regard, a problem of state capture in Georgia, where all the mechanisms of state governance, of institutions, political institutions, are practically completely captured. The process of state capturing is completed, in fact, so that we no longer have any institutional mechanism of fighting anti-democratic efforts or autocratic reversals, etc. We in fact have a situation where we have to fight the authoritarian system itself. And this is the problem not only for the society itself, and the problem of the political parties and political movements, etc., but also a huge problem for our neighbors, for our foreign partners, and etc., etc. I will a little bit talk about that in a few minutes. So the third problem is the tendencies of the political landscape, because what we are talking about is not only the result, the effects of the parliamentary elections, but this is a long-standing problems existing between the political parties and the society itself. So that for the moment, we have a huge problem of the inability of the political parties to mobilize supporters and peoples. We in fact have a situation in Georgia where the societal uproar, so to say, in many instances is confronted against the political activism of political parties. So now we have this kind of transitional period where the political parties have to redefine themselves. They have to rethink again their strategies, rethink their own content, and find new ways to reconnect with the people, with the society itself. So we will see what the events will bring upon Georgia in next days, months, and years to come. Whether we will have new players, new political figures, new parties and movements, or whether we will have a kind of well-established authoritarian system with a well-integrated systemic opposition parties within it. So as for the regional impact of the developments in Georgia, we have, I would say, several dimensions in this regard. First of all, what is the position of EU to that? To the developments? What is the position of NATO from the perspective of security architecture in Europe and in Greater Eurasia? What are the regional perspectives in terms of Turkey, Armenia, Azerbaijan? What about the Central Asian republics and post-Soviet Asian republics, and also the impact in a greater regional context of the Middle East? So all this is pretty much relevant to Georgia, because the problem of the government legitimacy is not only the problem for Georgians, but it's also a problem for European Union. We are the members of the so-called Troika. enlargement troika, so Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia. And as Maggie and others also said, we are now on in this kind of, I don't know, in this kind of a limbo where the government says until 2028 there will be no negotiations with about the integration process, but around 75 to 80% of Georgian population is strongly for the European integration, and not only for the European integration but for NATO integration as well. So this legitimacy problem is critically important also for bigger regional players such as China as well. So if you for example, if you had the possibility to look about it, to look the statements of our so-called prime minister and other Georgian Dream Party members, China is for them a kind of exemplary country where, Georgia could copy paste some kind of balancing international relationship or modus operandi. But at the same time, we see that in a bigger gathering in Beijing, where all the countries were invited, in the celebration of People's Republic of China, Georgia was not invited there. So even Armenia and Azerbaijan were invited there, but not the current government in Georgia. So we obviously see a great legitimacy problem of the current government, not only in the context of European, partners, European, members of the European Union, but also in the sense that, even the non-democratic countries like China do not regard Georgian Dream government as a fully legitimate one. So the next problem is, of course, the security architecture not only in the region, in greater post-Soviet area, and here is the war in Ukraine, a big elephant in the room. So we don't know yet how the war will end. We all obviously favor Ukraine to win decisively against Russia's forces. We no longer call them Russian forces. It's rather some kind of symbiosis between fascists and Russia. So we have a term, Russian forces. So we hope very much that the Ukrainians will prevail. But at the same time, the problem is that the European Union and NATO, we don't see clear signs of a deliberate strategy towards South Caucasus and Georgia in particular. And this is alarming because once you see the situation in Moldova, a country which is much closer geographically to European Union, Moldova neighbors, in fact, a NATO and European country, and is separated from Russia by a huge buffer country, which is Ukraine. And Moldova receives huge political, financial, and other support from the European Union. So there is no Moldova fatigue in Europe. Whereas a country which requires much more support, much more political security engagement, in the sense, not to abandon Georgia and keep this hope of European prospect and European integration for the Georgian society alive, we don't see this level of engagement, European engagement, NATO engagement in Georgia. And this is, to me, very, very alarming. Now, the pre-final point I would like to mention is that the regional, that the relevance of Georgia in general, the South Caucasus region is very much relevant to Georgia because you know that due to dramatic events in Poland just recently, when the Russian forces attacked Poland with kind of 20 or 20 plus drones. Fortunately, they were not with the warheads were not installed in the drones. But the point is that Poland completely closed the border with Belarus and Russia. So in the major transit route which connected China via Russia and Belarus to European Union is now closed. The question of and the relevance of middle corridor now is getting more and more relevance, more speed among European, Chinese, Central Asian governments to discuss whether middle corridor is now a viable alternative to the northern route. Obviously, the southern route, which runs via Turkey, Iran, etc., is no longer valid because of the situation in Iran. So this kind of from the economic transport perspective, South Caucasus gets, so to say, much more relevance to European Union. European Union has to think about it, whether it has to invest more, not only the political and security investments in the region, but also think more strategically in terms of investing resources in the stabilizing political situation for the sake of economic benefit. And finally, of course, they will, I would phrase it in a very blunt way. There will be no Georgian or Armenian integration in Europe or NATO without clear and more security presence of European Union and NATO in the region. So there will be no European perspectives for Armenia without Georgia, and there will be no European future in the region without Georgia being first admitted strongly to European space. But all these ideas, all these perspectives will be not possible to implement if Europe doesn't formulate clearly what are its European strategic security plans, intentions, and actions in order to secure not only the Georgian democracy, but in order to secure European strategic and geopolitical interests in the region, with an eye, of course, to Armenia. I will stop here and gladly be happy to respond to all the possible questions. Thank you very much.
Great, Shova. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so again, if anyone can put the comments in or questions into the panel, into the Q&A, we'll move forward into the kind of more facilitated discussion now amongst the panel. Thank you all for your great contributions so far. If I could ask a question to the panel, so please, anyone engage, just to really start this conversation moving, and it's kind of pulling across particularly the first two presentations, but also into Maggie's as well. As we see, civic space shrinking, as we see the protests and the policing of the protests, but at the same time we have an election process whereby we don't have full opposition contesting the elections. What do you see for the bigger picture moving forward? What does Georgia look like if effectively the elections are rigged and then are held by Georgian Dream again? What happens to this space that you already have that is being reduced? What happens to policing and the wider security actors? How will they respond? If anyone has a thought on that.
If I may, I will. I will try to explain the process. How we see in the long term. I mean, not long term, but until end of the year, the situation in Georgia. Since two parties are, I mean, two parties, two big parties are participating in the local election. I mean, Lelo and Gaharia's party, which are led by bankers. In the case of Lelo's case, Adri Japaridze and Khazaradze, both are bankers, shareholders, TBC Bank. They are thinking in different way. They have more business agenda. What we see on the level, on this grassroots level, they have business agenda towards with the Ivanishvili generally, and general in the political landscape. They see themselves as parties who has political process, who is participating in the political process and surviving as a party. Their mood is completely in this surviving modus. They want to survive as a party. Since in parallel situation we have the problem prohibiting of the parties. After investigation commission, after Tsulukiani's report, she tries now to go to the court, super constitutional court, to prohibit the WNM parties and parties who are linked to WNM. Every kind of party who are pro-Western party, who is pro-Western party and has somehow links to WNM, United Nations Movement, Misha Saakashvili's party, they are trying to prohibit these parties. In this matter, we have Lelo and Gahari's party, who try to survive, not to be prohibited, and they are thinking to collaborate or to work with even GD. They will survive in that matter. We, our way, and the other 7 parties who are in boycotting the local elections, we have this idea and we have this strategy to delegitimize Ivanishvili's regime until it cracks. And as Shalva said, isolated Georgian dream, isolated Georgia is problematic for China as well, for Russia as well. Isolated from the Western countries, Georgia is useless. So it means we are trying to crack Georgian dream and system until they are completely isolated, that they fall apart from this system. They have 3 main pillars, how they sustain their power. This is propaganda, media, and financing the propaganda, creating completely alternative reality, like the Russians are doing in Ukraine. They have police, and they have judges who are their judges, so-called their judges. So even in constitutional court. So it means state capturing process in this matter is fulfilled. So our strategy is not to play with this game, with his game, Ivanishvili's game. We are trying to bring him to our field. It means not collaborate with any of kind of institutions, not Central Election Commission, not the judges, not the media who is trying to create alternative reality. We are trying to sustain in trying to make a bigger, broader coalition, bigger, broader resistance to survive and to save our world and the people. That is this what Ivanishvili is trying is to legitimize the autocracy in this country, to legitimize the status quo, and to start on the blank page negotiations with the Western countries. They want to become like Azerbaijan. There is no real opposition. There is no real media, but there is a geopolitical interest towards Azerbaijan. But Azerbaijan is without the, like Shalwa said, without any corridors, transit corridors, nothing. So it's not powerless. So it means Ivanishvili wants, in because of geopolitical context for the Western countries, to say, so here I am autocratic system, and please live with it. The opposition is radical. The civil society are stupid because they have not registers for the transparency law, so-called transparency law. In reality, is a Russian law. So they want to create this atmosphere in Georgia. It's autocratic, like Azerbaijan, transiting the goods from Asia to Western countries, and they live happily. And the geopolitically, when we say in other words, if Ivanishvili gets this geopolitically construct here, it's like artificial created Nord Stream 2 for the Western countries, from Europe especially. The Nord Stream 2 has been built for Europe, but never used because it was under Russian control. In that case, Ivanishvili wants like Nord Stream 2 like system, which is controlled by Russia for transit purposes. So it's the same. It will never benefit from Europe from this corridor until here is a real autocratic system. I mean, in Georgia and in Armenia as well, like Shalwa said, it's interlinked. If we fail, it fails Armenia and fails the whole region, and the Black Sea region will be part of the Russian influence zones. It's like Nord Stream 2 controlling the gate, the golden key of our region will be held by Putin or Russia. So it means Ivanishvili is helping Putin to get the golden key, and we are resisting it. And the idea is that the Europe and the West sees that the West can be also holder of the golden key and use this resistance what we have here still, and still critical media, that we get enough support and we get enough sanctions for the regime.
Thank you, Gorgi. Anyone else from the panel would like to come in on this? Elena?
Like very short answer to your question is like nobody knows, and we are trying to be very hopeful. I'm a big believer that the fate of Georgia will be decided locally, and also the international society. What we have been observing is that international society strongly reacts towards what's happening in Georgia when they see strong will of people. And I think every one of us, none of us have mentioned that we have a big demonstration coming up on 4th of October. This is the same day as the so-called local elections are happening. I'm not one of the organizers of this event, but the organizer is already in jail, Levele Makhabeishvili. And the way a lot of people don't agree, including me, with some of the parts of the rhetoric that how this demonstration is being advertised. They are repeating this peaceful taking down of the government. But why this demonstration is interesting for me is because, first of all, a lot of people are coming. I haven't met anyone who is not involved in the protests, even if they don't agree with the rhetoric that they are not coming. A lot of people are coming, including from the regions, including immigrants, etc. In the last couple of years, whenever we had this like huge, unprecedented number of people on demonstrations, the propaganda machines were very careful about what were they saying. They used to say, yes, there were a lot of people, but of course not all of them are radical UNM supporters. Some of them are our supporters just being mistaken, etc. This demonstration, we already know it's going to be a lot of people on streets. And this demonstration is advertised as come out to peacefully take down the government. So I don't think there is a possibility for propaganda to say these people are mistaken and these people are just agreeing on some issues with the protesters, and maybe like some of them are even our protesters. Like these many people on streets will agree with this phrasing that maybe not the takedown of the government, that this government should go. Like they have like no elections, no release of prisoners. Like they just Georgian dream regime has to go. So I'm interested what will happen. Georgia is basically on free fall now, and we are just searching for some hopes. Like how can we and what can we hold on to? But if I don't know what will happen during elections. What I'm thinking is that at least in big cities, including the capital city, Tbilisi of Georgia, there will be the second tour just to further polarize the society. I'm pretty sure this is what's going to happen. It works like that. We have like if no one candidate has more than 50% of votes in first try, they have another tour, and this is when this is what I'm actually afraid of, because Lelo and Gacharia party are going to pressure protesters and even further to participate in this election, even though like everyone knows administration election under Georgian Dream regime is never going to like just hold fair elections, so to say. Like they are going to use every means to I have zero trust towards these elections. And what we also didn't mention is another factor, that Georgian Dream regime has huge internal conflicts right now, which has led to high-level detention in past few weeks, including a former defense minister, including a couple of days ago, they have detained one person for money laundering, and this money was it was a little bit more than 2 billion Georgian laris, which is unprecedented for Georgia. And even supporters of Georgian Dream are actively saying that it is impossible to launder so much money in just 2 years without some kind of support from the very heads of government. So we will see where it can lead. A lot of talks are there that ex-Prime Minister Garibashvili is in direct conflict with Irakli Kobakhidze, etc. So these things are also to be considered, including the outside pressure, including sanctions. For example, just a couple of hours ago, we learned that Czech Republic sanctioned 5 people. And usually the changes, or at least the possibilities of changes, they come when there are a lot of people on streets. This is when supporters of Georgian Dream and even some middle to high government officials feel the power on the other side. So let's see what it brings. Very shortly, no one knows what's going to happen, but these are the things that we are hopeful about. Unfortunately, I'm not able to analyze the situation in broader context internationally. My colleagues, fellow speakers are here for that, but I can speak about what's happening locally among activists. And these are the issues that everyone hopes for.
Thank you, Elena. Maggie, I think you had your hand up. Did you want to respond?
Yes. I wanted to add a bit on from international point of view, kind of from the point of view of international politics. And because on the one hand, Georgi and Elena summarized the situation, what's going on here, and what's the state of fight of Georgians. Because today it's 307th day of non-stop protest since November 28th. So it's huge for any country, and especially for a country like Georgia with limited capabilities, with such a small population. So the another factor is for me, which is quite troubling and not promising, is international response, especially of our Western partners. I would like to see a kind of more engagement and more support from their side, especially from the EU side. Elena mentioned the sanctions from the Czech Republic, which is good and is welcoming, because I know that I'm not an EU expert, but I know that the EU has an issue of making a decision, because they require consensus for creating sanctions, the list of sanctioned individuals. But if 1 or 2 member states will impose sanctions, others can implement that. So in that term is good, but also I would like to see more sanctions in regards to people who spread disinformation, propaganda, and in general involved in information operations. So we had recently, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, sanctions imposed by the UK against one individual who is Levan Vasadze, who is, yes, okay, he has been responsible for spreading disinformation and propaganda here in Georgia, but right now he's not as active as other actors here and other individuals, or even media outlets. So sanctioning such individuals do not really help the fight here in Georgia, and do not really help the situation here. So Also, what I want to make another point is that, which Lasha also mentioned, Shalom mentioned about these drones, yeah, an attack by Russia against the NATO. I see personally this is kind of one part of a big picture. So this all are part of Russia's malign activities. Let's say we can call it this different way. This is how Russia tries to influence Europe and especially eastern flank of NATO, which Georgia still is part of that. Okay, maybe Georgia is not a member of NATO or EU, but what happens in Georgia is definitely has an effect on wider Black Sea, where South Caucasus is an integral part. Of course, if something happens here, it will influence Black Sea, overall situation and the security in the Black Sea, and of course in Europe through Eastern Europe, basically, if we look geographically there. So if Russia needs to attack Poland and violate Poland or other NATO countries and violate their airspace, for them kind of spreading disinformation and all conducting in general information warfare and using information warfare tactics against Georgia right now is enough because of the government, so-called government, because the government can help them. And unlike Moldova, for instance, if Maya Sandu was a kind of guarantee of holding free and fair elections, in Georgia we don't have this. Layer, we don't have this actor, and that's why these people who are fighting, these people who want EU and want NATO, sometimes more than some NATO member countries and NATO member societies, these people need their support. And the support can come through sanctions. The support can come through non-recognition policy, which Shalva also mentioned. Some part, yes, they have legitimacy problems in general, but we need to see clear non-recognition policy towards ruling party Georgian Dream adopted by Western nations, especially in the EU, because it's sometimes misleading when on the one hand, for instance, I mentioned the UK, on the one hand you have the governments that impose sanctions or have certain policies towards individuals within Jordan Dream or related to Jordan Dream, but on the other hand you see for instance diplomatic engagements of local embassies with so-called ministers and so on. So this kind of inconsistency, so it needs to be somehow solved because for us also to be encouraged and to go on with this fight, I don't know, even better and more effectively. So this is my point. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Maggie. Shalva, did you want to add anything to the discussion on this point?
I think my colleagues covered everything more than enough, so there's no point to add anything.
Great. I'll just go back again to remind everyone the Q&A session. There's no questions in there at the moment, so unless we get some questions in there, we will finish early. I wanted to raise another question then, actually, that links to something Elen said regarding divisions emerging within Georgian Dream. But I want to extend that out beyond. Are you seeing those divisions both in Georgian Dream, but also do you see divisions in society as a whole at all? And then also within the security actors, are there divisions there? Is there any suggestion that at any time there might be a split within the security actors? That would go, some going obviously within the Georgian Dream side, but that there might be some opposition to the autocratic journey that the Georgian Dream are taking. Thank you.
Your first question was regarding these divisions, like with this internal conflict that's happening. This is actually like a little bit controversial issue. A lot of people believe that these are the cracks that these are the cracks that are coming out despite them not wanting it. There is also part of society, a smaller one, but still, that believes they probably feel so safe in their position that they are allowing themselves to, like, pre-election, just detain their former minister and go against this former minister, and basically everyone who has been detained, this high-level detention, are connected with ex-Prime Minister Irakli Garibashvili, who has been sidelined just after the first attempt of enactment of Russian law. He has been silent ever since, and I don't remember the exact date, but I think it was spring 2025 when he announced that he's leaving politics now, and he was the only Georgian Dream ex-member who was standing alone without any members, colleagues on his side to announce that he's leaving politics without any support. So it was interesting to see. And now basically they are going one by one and detaining his supporters. There are some talks that he has his detention is also coming up, etc. This persona, Garibashvili, also has its own supporters within the Georgian Dream, and also like we have these propagandists of Georgian Dream who are not officially part of the political party, but they are supporters, like public figures, etc., who speak on behalf of them. We also have seen some of them not directly, but it was implied supporting Garibashvili, but not in a, I wouldn't say that these cracks are in society, if it was what you meant under your question. I don't see this polarization happening within the Georgian Dream supporters because of this conflict or splits, because I don't know how to explain this, but being a supporter of Georgian Dream is not like an ideological thing. They are mostly anti-Western, anti-UNM, who some of them have been repressed under the UNM regime, and some of them have been under propaganda for so many years that has exaggerated what the government has done, that they have almost under their DNA to hate the ex-government and everyone who is affiliated with them. And there are also a lot of personal, there is also a lot of money, of course, involved, like the singers, the public figures, artists who have been bought by Bidzina Ivanishvili even before he entered the political field, right? Like he used to be this supporter of theater, supporter of the so-called elites who are now just within his pockets, and they have been a supporter of Georgian Dream for so long that some of them are now being victim of their own positions. And your next question was about the security actors, including the policemen, whether or not it is possible for them to crack. I know a lot of them, a lot of them have already left their positions during this past year. This is why Georgian Dream had to employ a lot of young policemen. Some of them really, we have this joke in Georgia, some of them really look like minors. There are just some people who just wear these uniforms and they with zero training, etc. You can see how they talk. You can see when you communicate with them that they are just like the mannequins. They're standing with the uniforms with zero training, no education whatsoever regarding how to do this job. What we know is that the ex-head of the division of the ministry responsible for raids against protesters, Irakli Shaishamelashvili, he lives now in the US. He resigned during protests and he was forced to immigrate with his family because of threats he received, etc. He released a statement I think it was a couple of weeks ago, saying that there are a lot of people actually within the security forces who are just waiting to see how many people are outside to just shift, and a lot of them are leaving their positions. This information officially doesn't come out, but I know that over 100 people have already left their positions, and there are these hopes that they are not going to exceed force, etc. I don't know what will happen. We'll see in a couple of days, but there are some there is some reason to believe that the sources that, for example, Irakli Shaishamelashvili has can be trusted, because we receive this information from multiple sources, but nothing to be sure.
Okay, thank you. Charlotte, did you have any comment on particularly on the security aspect and looking at the loyalties of security actors?
Yeah, just few comments on that. I think we are facing in the hands of Georgian Dream government a serious degradation of police force. First of all, we see a serious degradation of the standards of police recruitments, and not for nothing. The cases Elena mentioned were, I think, also minors or some individuals with a definitely no proper outfit were registered, and they were wearing some kind of signs of police force, definitely not to be attributed to proper police force. So these were some kind of strange individuals, and we have plenty of instances where not only the appearance of the police force, but the conduct of police force, not only during the demonstrations, but before and after, in irregular cases where typically the relationship between civilians and police force is typically standard-wise regulated by the conduct of behavior. Is a really, we have a serious and multiple violations of code of conduct, a basic normative body that typically police force applies when dealing with civilians. That's another aspect is, of course, that obviously there is a serious discontent within the police force, because on the one side you have a huge army of recruited unprofessional newbies, let's call it still police force, but newbies having no experience, nothing but promise some whatever monetary benefits, etc., etc. And on the other side you have a category of people who have worked there. Basically, this is a repetition of the same situation with like Maggie and others who served years in the public service, and now completely unhappy with the situation when they're being replaced by individuals having really nothing to do with the proper police, public service or police serving in the police. And this causes serious problems. This causes serious problems of the coherence, internal coherence of the police forces. This is why Georgian Dream is so seriously concerned about multiple leakages of information coming out from not only from the police forces but also from the security services, state security services as well. We always had in the during the past decades, even during the era of Saakashvili, there was this institutional problem of permanent reshuffling of security services. So you had an individual, for example, a minister appointed who has served for 6 months. He just started to get experience, in the Ministry of Defense or Ministry of Internal Affairs, and all of a sudden he was replaced by another guy, I assume with more, degree of confidence or whatever loyalty to president or to prime minister. And this kind of vicious circle of permanent reshuffling was seriously damaging the security institutions in Georgia. Now we have not only the situation with the Georgian Dream, who continued the same bad practice of permanent reshuffling, but also with a serious, with a serious attempts to damage the content, the internal content, not only the structure of the ministries and services, but basically to undermine the content of institutions by bringing more and more, basically occupying the positions by armies of unprofessional individuals that have really not only zero experience, zero competence, but the only thing they can show this is some kind of degree of loyalty, which is, by the way, is not secured at all. So it is just a kind of attack. I think this is a tactical moment where these individuals, have no other way, to secure some kind of employment, and they agreed and then signed up. But since there is no moral coherence, there is no loyalty based on virtues and values, I think this loyalty cannot last for long, and it really will be dependent on the radical, change of the situation on the street. So we will have a clear evidence of the shifting loyalties also within the security services. So this is, I think that's all for the moment.
Thanks, Shalva. Ellen, did you want to respond to something you heard there?
I just wanted to add one more issue on the security forces. I just wanted to also mention the level of hate that they have been receiving from public. With not only the videos of protesters on street being beaten by policemen have been circulating and being gone viral, but also the regime has actively used policemen as, we call them, fake witnesses. I just want to share my experience on this field, and we have like more than a couple of hundred such cases. I was fined with 500 lari on account of a policeman. We call them fake witnesses, who came into court and said that he saw me blocking street with constructions on a particular day and in a particular time period. I made him repeat that time period so that I was sure that he couldn't say, he couldn't refuse his whatever he said. And I brought in the evidence that I was actually in the studio on a TV Israeli broadcasting. I was just sitting in studio and talking live about what was happening in the protest, and I was still fined with 500 lari. So there are more than hundreds of such cases, and a lot of people know their names. We have their pictures circulating on social media, etc. And the amount of hate that they have been, and we also confront them on streets when we see them, like laughably just going with cameras and saying you were the one who whatever. It is impossible for me that they are comfortable, a lot of them, these policemen, with what they are doing. And I feel like I really think that a lot of them are just searching for a reason how to come out of this regime with dignity. Yeah.
Thanks, Elena. Maggie, Georgi, do you have anything you wanted to add to any of these comments before I move? Okay, great. So we have two questions in the chat. Sorry, Georgi.
Yes, one additional information. In 2021, Georgian Special Security Services signed a memorandum with Belarusian Special Security Services. The information flow is huge between them. It means the Russians have everything what they have to need to know. And in the Special Security Services, there are also some criminal gangs who are observing the situation and also controlling the police. Especially the new ones, newcomers. So the new ones, they are easily controlled than the older ones, the systemic ones who were in the police since many years. So mostly they resigned already, but the new ones, they are more under influence, and yeah, it is not easy for them also to quit their job. It was not only short edition information.
Thank you, Georgi. Okay, we'll move to the Q&A session. There are two questions at the moment. We don't have too long left. So in the Q&A box, there's a question from Nata.
Sorry, Richard.
Richard,
sorry, before Nata, we had George Robakidze who wanted to ask a question live. So after that, we will have Nata. So George, I'm allowing Mike and camera as well if you want to. Please introduce yourself and ask your question.
Wait a second. Yes. Okay. So first of all, thank you very much for a very interesting introduction. I will be very short since we are running out of the time. My question will gonna go to the panelists, and I would just want to divert your attention to another issue, and particularly the issue of the immigrants. I mean, take into account the role of the immigrants in Moldova's elections generally and in Moldova's political life, how do you think that we can activate or use more the potential that the Georgian immigrants have? Because we already have a quite well-established organizations and personalities in almost every European country where they can be more active in disseminating the right messages and contradicting the governmental propaganda. So that would be my question. Thank you very much.
Okay, and should we read from Nata's question and just answer all this all together? I think it will be better
Sure.
yeah. So we have here in the chat question from Nata Koridze. I know her, so I will make a brief introduction. She's a former editor-in-chief of Civil G, and also former diplomat, having a large career, also dismissed on political grounds before this crackdown happened. So Nata is asking, can you please touch upon the role of large business in the ongoing processes? We have heard rumors that they are sabotaging the protest movement abroad, asking international partners to not impose sanctions on GD officials. What can the societies and other actors' response to be to this? So.
Thanks, Maggie. Georgi, you have your hand up, so if you want to go first, please, and if we can keep these
first question
quite brief.
to Georgia. Yeah, so it's the brief answer. Actually, we won the elections in abroad among the diaspora. Even us, the Coalition for Change, had the highest number of voters in abroad. But the difference is between us and between Moldova that the Moldova has a pro-Western government, and these institutions are under their control. In our case, it's completely opposite. We have the government and the state structures completely under Ivanishvili's control. We can, of course, activate our immigrants outside of Georgia, but since they are the Central Election Commission is Ivanishvili's proxy, they will register them not in the fair manner. So it means until the system is changed here in Georgia, there is no chance to activate or to use or to have support from their votes outside of Georgia. So this is a huge difference in our case and in Moldova's case. And about the second questions, yeah, there are some. This is not rumors. We know from our partners or Western countries, because I'm working on this sanctions topic since last year. There are, of course, big businesses who are supporting Ivanishvili in indirect way. They are saying them that if Ivanishvili is sanctioned, then the banks will be how it's called, the banks will dilute the money, and Ivanishvili will do everything to sabotage the country. I mean, the businesses and the big businesses. So it means indirectly they are supporting Ivanishvili, or directly, maybe they are directly, but in the case they are saying that yeah, the sanctions not to sanction the businesses. The businesses who are supporting Ivanishvili, because otherwise the Ivanishvili will crack down everyone in business sector and kill every kind of business in Georgia. So they are trying to self-survival modus.
Thank you, Georgi. Is there anyone else from the panel who would like to respond to these questions? Maggie, please.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to expand a bit Moldova's case with allowing participation of people from abroad. So, as Georgi mentioned, this is all in hands of the government usually, right? The government needs to negotiate and ensure that at the polling stations abroad in the countries, first you need to identify the countries where you have sufficient number of potential voters, your citizens. This is first. The next is you need to negotiate with local government governments to allow them to have additional polling stations, except for the diplomatic missions, which is the usual, which usually happens. So in case of Georgia, just because government wants to limit the participation of people living abroad, because they know that their senses and emotions and oppositions are opposition, and they are not pro-government. That's why they are allowing them to have voting rights and vote only at the diplomatic stations or within diplomatic missions. Sorry, where there are polling stations, and this is very bad practice, because sometimes we are a small country. We have limited capabilities, and our diplomatic missions cannot, for instance, offer to handle the large number of citizens who want to vote abroad. So this is the big difference. If Moldova is doing everything to give these people opportunity to use their votes and participate in the elections, in Georgia, the situation is completely different. The government is doing everything in order to prevent these people from voting. So this is just my quick comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Maggie. Elena or Shalva, did you want to add anything?
I will add just very quickly about the immigrants. First of all, thank you very much for this question. I know that in a lot of EU countries, the immigrants have been organizing, establishing some associations. I think, I can only think of two issues that they can be very helpful, since the most important things right now are happening on streets and they are not in Georgia. First of all, like a lot of these associations could meet with the local ministries of foreign affairs and just bring as much information as they have and make them support sanctions against members of Georgian Dream. And the second is finances. This is a very important issue, since the fines, this 5,000 lari fines, etc., and also the finances that some activist groups need to just go on, because those activists who have become sort of the faces, or this protest doesn't have any leaders, but who are very outspoken and visible, they are unable to find any jobs because they are politicized, and a lot of businesses are scared to associate themselves with them. So protest needs a lot of money. So if they could help with that, including the transfer issues, like a lot of possibilities like MoneyGram, etc., need some addresses outside of the country. So if they could somehow get in touch with a local activist group and come up with this solution, some of them are really easy. Like some of this activist group just needs an address outside of the country, completely legal, like nothing, again, nothing scary, just some things that we cannot do from inside. And I also wanted to touch upon the issue of businesses. We have heard that Archil Gachachiladze, who is the CEO of Georgian Bank, is going door to door saying to people to not sanction financially Bidzina Ivanishvili, because the reason is that his finances are very important to Georgian GDP, and it could have catastrophic results. I don't see a way of boycotting this business, because it's one of the biggest banks in Georgia, and a lot of people are dependent on this bank financially, including a lot of people who are already involved in the protest. So what I haven't seen so far, and this is very unfortunate, is the counter narrative of this, someone very qualified just bringing arguments to the same people why this is a lie, and why sanctioning Bidzina Ivanishvili could be actually very productive for Georgia. I have met actually this man, this Archil Gachachiladze, in January. We wanted him to make a statement that he wouldn't punish his employees for participating in 3-hour walkout, and his response was that nobody knows that everything could turn out differently, and that the fact that we are saying that Georgia has turned its back on European Union and is going towards Russia could be somehow like, he was never a believer in the protest, and he's not a believer of the values that the protest has, even from the beginning. So yeah. just wanted to share this information about him, since I'm very angry.
Thank you, Elena. Thanks very much. Shava, did you have any final comments before I wrap up? You're on mute, Shava.
Thank you. I think the question formulated by Georgi was very valid one. The role of Georgians living abroad, specifically in the European Union, and Maggie's response was exactly to the point. You can compare these two countries, Moldova and Georgia. In fact, Moldovans living abroad within the different countries of the European Union play a decisive role in the parliamentary elections in Moldova, saving Moldova from non-European perspective. Let's go that way. In our case, in Georgian case, Georgian Dream did everything possible to prevent Georgians living in Europe and elsewhere to swing, let's say, and decide the fate of Georgia in a more pro-European, pro-Western future. From that perspective, I think I don't want to say and to blame that Europe is culprit and has to do and did nothing or something like that. No, my only point is that, and I won't be tired to reiterate that if you have ever listened to the statements made by former Prime Minister Olaf Scholz in Berlin in 2020, I think 4 was it, when this European socialists gathered in Berlin, and Olaf Scholz declared Europe from Lisbon to Tbilisi. And then Ursula von der Leyen again highlights that Europe cannot be united without, all the candidate countries belonging to the European family. To me, this is a strategic statement. And you don't make strategic statements without strategies, without proper strategies and proper plans that addresses all the challenges and problems, including of those countries that theoretically or strategically are reviewed in the European capitals as a part of Europe or a European Union in the future. And that is, I think, a major problem. Again, I served 3 years in NATO, and there was this famous saying, you cannot dance a tango alone. You need a partner. So, if a European partner doesn't have a partner in the body of the Georgian government, it has a strong partner in a body of Georgian society. So let's make this partnership work. But this is only possible if Europe shows enough energy, enough willingness to engage Georgia, not to abandon it.
Thank you, Shava. I think that's a really great point to end on, actually, while, Georgians themselves, as Maggie said, I think, was it 317 or more days continually out on protest. It's up to your partners, European partners, to stand up as well and support you. We're going to finish there for today. Please note that the next webinar details will be added on the platform's webpage, and we will be circulating them widely. We'd really appreciate if everyone here can also do the same. The recording of this webinar will also be on the platform webpage, and we'll be really grateful if you could widely disseminate this to really get the kind of readership, viewership up, because we'd really like to get this moving for the other 2 webinars as well, and really try to get the issue of the elections in Georgia on the map much more, and get people talking about them much more, albeit within Georgia, which is fantastic, but also outside, and start trying to push European partners to engage more. Thank you so much, Elena, Maggie, Shava, and Georgi. It's been a fascinating conversation. I look forward to the next 2 iterations. Thank you all to the audience as well. And I wish you all the best of luck for the elections and the days and weeks and months ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, colleagues, friends.
Thank
See you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.